Shalom. All praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well. And peace and mercy to the hopeful elect, the 144,000 men that are doing this work in sincerity and in truth around the four corners of the earth. And much love to the 1/3 and the innumerable multitude of you believers out there. To you all, I say Shalom. I'm the brother Yeshaya, and I pray, Lord willing, that this lesson is edifying through the Spirit. All right. So I was meditating on something, a couple things, which made me come to this topic through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai. Number one, it started from watching a movie. I've been lacking on my movies, y'all. Y'all know, I like some cinema, but I've been busy, man. Been busy in life and, everything. You get busy from doing the things that you think you enjoy doing, you know what I'm saying? And plus, man, time and other things you're trying to be dedicated to, things get lost in the up and that. But nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. A movie and then about something that the Muslims do, okay, which derived me to come to this point. Excuse me, I got a yawn. Forgive me. Jake just woke up not too long ago. But anyway, so the movie that I was watching, it was actually recommended by the brother Baar in the camp, and then a brother and his wife mentioned it as well, and it's called 40 Acres. All right, now I'm not going to say that this movie was like all time amazing. I'm not going to say that. But was it watchable and had edifying points and had good scenes? Yeah, I'll give it that. Okay. And therefore I would watch it again for more context, but it's not, I'm not going to get you all hyped up like this is a must see. I'm not saying that, but it was good for what it's worth. And the main point was the theme. All right. I'm not going to put it all on blast, but basically, it showed a movie based on the concept of everything in the world. There was basically became a famine. It became a famine. And so now the most important thing was farmland, which one I thought was ironic because now Bill Gates is owning this huge amount of farmland in America, right? But it said farmland. So ultimately, the people that didn't have farms, you can guess what they end becoming. They end up, and I ain't trying to put it on blast, but people became cannibals. I wish they would have showed more with that, really exploited that kind of scene. Sometimes I like the grimy and gritty stuff, but I wish they would have explored more with that side. But nonetheless, it's still edifying because those are things we talk about with the scriptures, right? We talk about famine, we talk about dearth, we talk about drought, we talk about cannibalism, we talk about all these things, which is going to come, all right? But then I also thought about, so my next thought that I'm connect the dots here. One time we spoke to some Muslims and even, they was talking about it. So basically, as a Muslim, you have the authoritative right to eat swine, aka pork, pig, to eat swine in times of life-threatening matters. Ultimately, that's the best way to put it. I don't know exactly how it's worded within the unholy Quran, but to that extent, you're allowed to break the law of your God by him saying you're not supposed to eat pork. But now in that instance, when your life is on the line, you can eat pig. So it's just wrong for so many reasons, so God has told you your whole life, you got to do this. But now that your life is in peril, you can change it. And when you understand the Bible, our God says in Malachi, the 3rd chapter, he says, right? Matter of fact, let me just go ahead and read it. It's better. And I already know what to say. but let me read it here. All right. Malachi 3 and verse 6, it says, "For I am the Lord Yahweh, I change not. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob are not consumed." Right? So it says, "I am the Lord, I change not." So he don't change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. He don't change about his laws. He said his law is perfect. It's pure, converting the soul. We just got sins. This flesh is what destroyed us. The motions of sin. Right? But he said, "I change not." So he's not going to say, "Hey, yo, you can eat swine on your deathbed," or, So ultimately, in thinking about those two combinations of things, it led me to the thought that just because danger, I'm probably worded different, but just because danger or a threat is there does not mean you have the right to break the law, statutes, and commandments of the Heavenly Father. Now, I do understand wholeheartedly that we are not saved by the law. We are saved by grace. I understand that. All right. But this is where you have to have faith and it kicks in. I'm just giving this as a disclaimer. Okay. Because somebody's like, "So you telling me God would rather have me die than to eat pig?" Oh, and also down in Cuba, the dude was telling us in Cuba, the tribe of Manasseh, the only reason that they're living is because they're having an increased amount of swine. So why do you think that is, tribe of Manasseh? So instead of making it cows prevalent or goats or lambs, why are they giving you this increased amount of pig? Because they know that's what breaks your covenant with the Most High. That's why they're giving you pigs. That's why the pigs are in so much in abundance. Why swine? Okay, ask yourself that. So even in that instance, in life-threatening situations, hey, become a fucking vegetarian, bro. That's not an excuse. Become a vegetarian. Go outside, plant some plants. Make some onions and bell peppers and squash and tomatoes, potatoes, corn. You can make all of that, bro. So that's an excuse for people. The Lord said they're looking for a license to sin. The Lord ain't gonna give you one. The Lord ain't you. This ain't no DMV with the Most High. You can't just walk in and get a stamp of approval that he gonna say it's okay for you to break his law, right? It says you should not break any of the least commandments. Now, like I said, I'm gonna get these scriptures going in this because I got a few of them, a few examples, right? But you're not supposed to in any situation break the law of the Most High. So Jacob's trouble is coming, right? We understand that as a body, as brothers, as a nation, right? Well, that means not say it's a nation, the nation of the elect, because the nation of our people don't know. The 2/3 don't know, and even the other Israelites saying there's not going to be any Jacob's trouble, they don't know. So the hopeful elect, we know, Lord willing, we be of that number, right? So you got to know, we're saved by grace, but you know that just because Jacob's trouble pops off, which is going to be the worst time in history, it doesn't give you an example to eat swine. It doesn't give you an example to eat people. All right. It does not give you the option to eat people. All right. Jake will think, oh, well, this is the only food source. If you've gotten to that point where you got to eat people, that means the Lord's favor ain't even with you, brother. And even if it is, it says strive for the Lord unto death, and he's going to fight for you, right? So that means, hey, if you got to die, if your options are eating people and dying, brother, hey, it's time to go. Ask the Lord to call you home, But let me get some examples here. This is 2 Maccabees 6, and I'm going to start at verse 8. It says, "Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices." And see that they want the people to be partakers of the same fact. They want us to be as they are. They want us to. That's why they love Jake celebrating July 4th and Christmas. They love you being in the world. They love you celebrating Thanksgiving and Halloween. They love you doing those things. They love you eating pork. They love you shaving your beard and taking part in the things that they do. When in Rome, right? Do as the Romans do. Right? That's what they want you to think, man. It says, "And whoso would not conform themselves to the matters of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. right? So at that time, right, if we didn't observe the heathenistic customs and do what they did, our people would be put to death. All right. And this may very well happen again. There could be laws put in place that are going to be basically, if you follow the Bible, it's going to be unlawful in the land to follow the Bible. And now we always say, yes, you follow the laws of the land. All right. But this is where people will say, well, if you follow the law of the land, well, they said it's okay to eat people. Right. A law. Let's say they pass a law and say, yeah, you now get free range to eat people illegally. Right? Because there's no other food out there. The law of the land is upheld unless it betrays the laws of the Most High. Okay, let me repeat that again. The laws of the land are prevalent and exist and rule unless they break the laws of the Most High. Okay, so they commanded everybody, said this day forward, man and woman can no longer have intimate physical action, intimate actions. Now it can only be done between men and women and women. Hey, brother, Lord willing, that'll never happen, but we in Sodom and Gomorrah. But that means you got to be, hey, brother, you just gonna have to not, if for some reason, let's say you can't secretly get none, you just got to deal with yourself to the Lord come back, man. You can't be out here breaking the laws of the Most High just because the laws of the land state otherwise, or the heathen wants you to do something. You got to be ready to be put to death. But it says, so, and this is about to be an example of women in this one. So this, how you know, is no excuse. This 2 Maccabees 6:10, for there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, whom when they had openly led round about the city, the babes hanging at their breasts, they cast them down headlong from the wall. Right? So they had these babies and these women who were, even though it was a law to not follow the customs of the Bible, basically you can't circumcise your children. All right? They said, fuck that, ultimately, so excuse my French, but we're going to serve the Most High and circumcise our children. That's according to the law. Now, at the end of the day, if your son or brother, he's not circumcised, ultimately that's okay. Right? So this is where we understand grace, right? You don't have to get circumcised. Okay? It says the Lord circumcises the flesh of your heart, the foreskin of your hearts. Okay? However, it is a Israelite custom that we are to keep if possible. All right? So they were trying to keep this custom and they ended up dying for it. So that lets you know that they didn't stop keeping the commandment of the Lord, even though they got judged for it. Right? But the Lord is going to bless them for that. Ultimately, it says, and others that had run together into caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day secretly, being discovered by Philip, were all burnt together because they made a conscience to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. You see that? So because they had a conscience to help themselves for the most sacred day, they wanted to keep the Sabbath day, so they went off in the caves to, keep the Sabbath day holy. But they got put to death. So even though it was a threatening situation, they still kept the laws of the Most High, even though their lives were in peril. All right? So if these people were doing it in this time, and we're coming into the time of, now we know that the Lord is about to return, how much more your strength and mental fortitude is supposed to be in these last days. It says, now I beseech those that read this book that they be not discouraged for these calamities, but that they judge those punishments not to be for destruction, but for a chastening for our nation. You see that? So the Lord didn't do that to destroy our people. So don't be discouraged when you hear them. You be encouraged to keep the words of the law. But the Lord said that was for a chastening because our people needed a whooping. Our people were being wicked and going off. So the Lord did it, right? Not for our destruction, but just for a whooping. It's just like when your parents, people died. Yes, of course. But a whooping is not meant to ultimately kill you. People might have died, but this is talking about a godly whooping, right? People are going to die, but it's for a chastening for our nation, so our people could correct themselves. That's ultimately what a whooping is meant to correct. All right, a whooping is meant to discipline. A whooping is meant to help you not do the same thing again. So the Lord would slay some of our people and judge our people so that we will learn to obey Him and not obey the other nations, not do as the other nations do. That's how we became subject and slaves unto them in the first place, by wanting to serve their idols. So the Lord made us subject unto them. All right, it says, for it is a token of his great goodness when wicked doers are not suffered any long time, but forthwith punished. Whoo! Hey, that's beautiful. So it's a great goodness when the Lord, you see a man, a demon get punished quickly, right? Because we know judgment is always executed speedily, right? But it comes, but it's a good thing when you see it come quick. Call out Yabashim al-Shai. All right, and this really is this whole chapter is great. But let me jump down to our forefather here, our forefather Eleazar in verse 18. It says, Eleazar, one of the principal scribes, an aged man and of a well-favored countenance, was constrained to open his mouth and eat swine's flesh, right? He was forced to eat swine, right? It says, but he, choosing rather to die gloriously than to live stained with such an abomination, spit it forth and came of his own accord to the torment, right? So they putting that in his mouth, he spit it forth, And matter of fact, let me get this in a GNT real quick. I'm just interested to see what this verse says. 2 Maccabees 6 and 18. Let's see what it says here. It says, there was an elderly and highly respected teacher of the law, see that, which is a scribe, a priest, by the name of Eleazar, whose mouth was being forced open to make him eat pork. It says it right there. But he preferred an honorable death rather than a life of disgrace. So he spit out the meat and went willingly to the place of torture, showing how people should have courage to refuse unclean food, even if it cost them their lives. Call all y'all about Shema Shah. That's really, I can wrap up the lesson right there. Shout out to Eleazar for that one, man. All right. But going back to the KJV, 2 Maccabees 6 and 20, as it is behooved them to come that are resolute to stand out against such things, so are not lawful for the love of life to be tasted. So the difference, now you see the difference between the Israelite man and the Ishmaelite man, the difference between a man who serves the Most High and a man who serves the Quran, right? An Israelite man, a true believer, he's going to say it's better to die, right? That word says, even if it costs you your life. So even if it costs you life, you're supposed to refuse pork. Muslims don't teach that, okay? The Bible does, though. This is how heavily we believe in our God and our power, even if you got to die, man. And the crazy thing is they supposed to be the ones willing to blow themselves up. But see, that's another thing they want. They want death to be immediate, They don't want to go through the suffering. That's why Ishmael, they're a wild man, but that's why they'll blow themselves up. You never see them inject a slow seeking poison into themselves. They go in, try to harm other people, and they blow themselves up, strap bombs to themselves and get it over with quick. It says, verse 21, but they had the charge of that wicked feast. You see that? It's wicked. So even if you're in Jacob's trouble and you see dudes eating pork and they thinking they got a whole meal, that's a wicked feast. It says, for the old acquaintance they had with the man, taking him aside, besought him to bring flesh of his own provision, such as was lawful for him to use, and make as if he did eat of the flesh taken from the sacrifice commanded by the king. So they basically wanted him to finesse. Hey, brother, you got some lamb back there? Bring you some lamb, sit at the table, and just eat lamb. But the people will think you eating the pork. You see, let me get this one in the GNT 21. It says, those in charge of the sacrifice had been friends of Eleazar for a long time, and because of this friendship, they told him privately to bring meat that was lawful for him to eat. He need only pretend to eat the pork, they said, and in this way he would not be put to death. So even though he wouldn't be going off, right, by because then at that point they're like, all right, bro, just bring your food. And you can so now if your problem is eating the pork, just make the people believe you eating pork. But y'all, that's worse. Shit. Eating pork is going off for sure, but that's worse. Making your whole nation of people, you've been this man who's been standing by the law your whole life, and now you making all of these congregation, hundreds of people believe that eating pork is okay, even if you eating lawful food. Because it's not always about what it looks, it's not always about what it is, it's also about what it looks like. Okay? And it says you should bring no blame to the ministry. So now everybody be like, look, Eleazar eating pork, Eleazar eating pork. And then he can be like, no, I was eating lamb. They can be like, where? We saw you eat pork. We saw you. You see what I'm saying? And so now they're going to have him going to think it's okay to eat pork, and the other half is just going to lose respect for Eleazar. All right. Going back to KJV, verse 22, it says that in doing so, he might be delivered from death, and for the old friendship with them find favor. But he began to consider discreetly. He thought about it, and as became his age and the excellency of his ancient years and the honor of his gray head, whereon was come and his most honest education from a child, or rather the holy law made and given by the Most High Yahweh. Therefore he answered accordingly and willed them straightways to send him to the grave. Go ahead, kill me now. Y'all just kill me, right? He says, for it becometh not our age, said he, in any wise to dissemble, whereby many young persons might think that Eleazar, being 80 years old and 10, were now gone to a strange religion, right? So they all end up doing things that they weren't supposed to do, following these heathenistic customs, right? It says, and he was 90 years old, right? 80 years old and 10. So 80, is 80, right? 80 is basically so basically 40 twice plus 10, so 80 plus 10. He's 90 years old. He's a very old man. And he says, and so they, through mind hypocrisy and desire to live a little time and a moment longer, so just so I can live a little bit longer, right? Y'all want me to be a hypocrite? It says, should be deceived by me, and I get a stain to mine old age and make it abominable. So you've been living your whole, what they say, you can live your life doing all these good things. It only takes one moment to destroy it all, one bad thing to destroy it all. So all these great things you did your whole life, your living legacy is gonna be like, man, that dude ate pork before he died. That dude ain't really believe in the Most High. That's what you're gonna be your memory. Your memory is not gonna be all them 90 years. Them 89 years you was serving Yahweh Shem Shah, they're gonna remember you for that 1 year you was disobedient. You see that? You see how that works? You know, and you know, this brother, he's no longer in the camp, but I'll never forget. He said something profound one time in one of his lessons. He said, you know, your reputation is like glass. And I mean, I thought that line was so heavy. He said, your reputation is like glass. He said, if you break it and shatter it, no matter how much you glue it and try to design it back together, it'll never be the same again. You know, and I always thought that when I heard him say that, I was like, damn, that's a profound statement. It really is. You know, it says a good name is better than precious ointment. Okay? So in your good name, that ultimately goes into your reputation. So this man, he said he didn't want to stain his reputation. It says, for the present time, I should be delivered from the punishment of men. So though I might not, y'all might not kill me if I go ahead and eat this, yet should I not escape the hand of the Almighty, neither alive nor dead. So if I listen to what y'all say, that means the Most High, he's gonna kill me if I'm alive, or if I die, I still got to deal with Yahweh. So I'm gonna choose what they say in the world. Who you more afraid of? You know, and they have a dude, they'll like have him captive and they have a gun to his face. And they'll be like, man, I can't tell y'all the information. You know, Corleone gonna kill me. They'll say something like that. He's like, fool, I'll kill you right now. They'll say stuff like that. So it's like, who you got the greater fear of? But when you know the answer to that question, the greater fear is of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. So now your decision is easy after that, ultimately. He said, wherefore now, manfully changing this life, I will show myself such as one as mine age requireth, right? When you become a certain age, you're supposed to lead our people. You're supposed to be as befitting of an elder, okay? This is a true elder. I'm not talking about like the elder in the world when they say respect your elders. This is a true elder, a man worthy of respect, following the laws and statutes and commandments of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, right? It says, and leave a notable example to such as be young to die willingly and courageously for the honorable and holy laws. And when he had said these words, immediately he went to the torment, Okay, it says that they led him changing the good while they bear him a little before into hatred, because the foresaid speeches proceeded as they thought from a desperate mind. Let's see what that one says in the NLT. It says, and the very people who treated him kindly a few minutes before now turned against him because they thought he had spoken like a madman. You see that? They like, oh, you know, the people, that's how you know, hey, they're fickle, man. The same dudes that was acting like your friends, now that you don't do what that's how you know who your real friend is. When, you know, at the end of the day, the Lord says, you are my true friends when you have do whatsoever I commanded. So he's a friend of Yahweh Shai. Fuck if you're friends of these men. But that's how you know a true friend, or people that's really down for you, right? Because just because y'all disagree on something, don't mean they're going to hate you afterwards. Okay? They said they had hatred for him after this, man. You see? It's turned into hatred. But when the other day, me and the brother Gabar, you know, we get into our little disagreements, if you will. And I was at the brother's house, you know, just a little open moment. Me and the brother was, I don't know what we was talking about, you know, some shit in the world. But we had a disagreement. And then his wife, she was like, it's so interesting when you guys disagree. I was like, oh no, we don't disagree. We argue. You know, I was just talking shit. But it was funny. We all got a good laugh out of it. But the thing is, you know, I love that brother. And that brother loves me. So just because we get into a disagreement, it ain't about the scriptures. You know, just because we get into a disagreement don't mean that we're going to have a certain level of hatred towards each other. We're just going to love each other because at the end of the day, the doctrine and the law, statutes, commandments, and the grace of the Lord is what's our glue. And that's what keeps us together. But these people, they had a hatred for him. All right. But it says, when he was ready to die with stripes, he groaned and said, it is manifest unto the Lord that at the holy knowledge that whereas I might have been delivered from death, I now endure sore pains in my body, being beaten, but in soul and well content to suffer these things because I fear him. You see that? This is a powerful statement. They say he's speaking like a madman. Nah, this is the only man in the room that got sense, right? So they beat him. They beat him to death, man. This is what happened to Eleazar, man. Eleazar was beat to death. If you really look at this on a level, he was beat to death because he didn't eat pork. That's the summary, right? It's much more in the emotional factor and the things that took place and the righteousness, and of course, but if you look at it on a base level, this man was put to death because he didn't eat pork. And his life was on the line for it. But he decided to serve and fear Yahweh B'Shem Shai. That's powerful, right? It says, and thus this man died, leaving his death for an example of a noble courage and a memorial of virtue, not only unto young men, but unto also his nation. Okay, and I'm going to read that in the NLT. It says, when they had beaten him almost to the point of death, he groaned and said, the Lord possesses all knowledge, all holy knowledge. He knows I could have escaped these terrible sufferings and death. Yet he also knows that I gladly suffered those things because I fear him. So Eleazar died, but his courageous death was remembered as a glorious example, not only by young people, but by the entire nation as well. So now that's kept a memorial unto this very day. See what I mean? So the things that we do are written in the scriptures. So you don't escape that shit no way. You think, oh, maybe I can eat some. Well, you know, it says they would eat swine's flesh under the groves and think of eating mouse. You know, and they think they doing it in secrecy. The Lord see all that, and all that's going to get written down. So you think you escape, but now look at this man's testament. It's written in history as a notable example of how to serve Yahweh B'Shem Shai. You know, how glorious is that, man? How glorious is that through the Spirit? You know? Let me see here. It's like I had to check something. Okay. You know, so such a glory example of righteousness, of dedication, of loyalty, of fealty. You know, you got to love it and respect it, man. You know, but let me go on to some other things here. You know, I ain't got too much more, but that, you know, that one hit the nail on the head. But this is a way to be. This is 1 Corinthians 15:56. The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. You see that? The strength of sin is the law. That's what keeps you from sinning. The strength of sin, it keeps you from your flesh. You remember the law. You remember what Yahweh Shai said to do. You remember what not to do. You remember not to disobey his law, statutes, and commandments. The strength of sin is the law and the fear of the Lord, man. Okay? Oh, this is 1 Maccabees 1 and verse 54. It says, now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation. And by the way, Eleazar, he was a 90-year-old man, and they beat him to death. Can y'all understand that? How wicked do you have to be to beat a 90-year-old man? Them fucking devils. They're going to get judged for that. It says, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they had found, they burnt them with fire. And whosoever was found with any book of the testament, or of any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. You see? So if you had a Bible, if you owned a Bible, if you kept the ways of the Bible, right, you were being put to death, right? This is why ultimately the Lord putting it in our inward parts already. You know, we gonna need that new body, you know, but this is why the Lord letting us, you know, we already know what to do. You know, reading and tapping back into the source is helpful, but we already know what to do. You know what to do and what not to do according to the Bible if you've been in the truth this long. You know, the Lord guides us, okay? You know, he guides us with his word. This chapter goes on. I mean, in fact, let me just keep reading here. Jumping down to verse 60, it says, at which time, according to the commandment, that they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised, and that they hanged the infants about their necks, and rifled their houses, and slew them that had circumcised them. Howbeit many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing, right? A lot of Israel said, man, fuck it, we just gonna have to die. It says, wherefore the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died, and there was very great wrath upon Israel. You see? So even in times of tribulation, in times of threatenings, in times of that they're telling you you might be put to death, you got to serve Yahweh Shai. There's no excuse. If you go off and do that, that means because that's something that you wanted to do anyway, and you're just weak. Okay? And the Lord don't play that, man. He don't want weak men. That's why he say he don't want you to be effeminate. So I'm not going to read this whole chapter. I'm just going to get a couple verses here. But I couldn't help but bring this one up. This is 2 Maccabees 7 and 1. Now, this chapter, you know, a lot of brothers find it haunting, if you will. It's about torture. You know, it's not too, like, it's a lot of terrible moments in scripture, but I think this is one of the main ones that talks about torture. So a lot of brothers find this one hard, but I quite, it's fucked up, but I quite enjoy this chapter because it lets you know the veracity, the strength that men and a woman were ultimately willing to fight for Yahweh Shai, even in the moments of most terrible situations. And so I always admire this chapter. But it's 2 Maccabees 71. It says, it came to pass also that 7 brethren with their mother were taken and compelled by the king against the law to taste swine flesh, and were tormented with scourges and whips. See, they were going all in on our people, man. It says, but one of them that spake first said thus, what wouldest thou ask or learn of us? We are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our fathers. So they already made it up in their mind. Like, hey, if you're going to try to get us transgress the laws, we just going to have to kill us, bro. We're not about to do what you want to do. All right. It says, then the king being in a rage, he's mad after hearing that. Like, these niggas not just going to do what I want them to do. That's Esau. That's Esau too. He wants you to just do what he want to do. The heathen nations, do what I tell you to do. I'm ruling the place. Do what I tell you to go. But they don't understand the power of Yahweh Shai is ever more strengthening, is present, and more fearful than an Edomite or a heathen could ever be. No matter how much strength you got, even if you got a fucking army. Then the king, being in a rage, commanded pans and cauldrons to be made hot. So he wanted to boil and torture Jake. Which forthwith being heated, he commanded to cut out the tongue of him that spake first. You see that? Cut out his tongue so he can't speak no more. That's how upset he was. Esau's a master torturer. You know, and that comes from the scriptures first, torturing, man. And to cut off the utmost parts of his body, the rest of his brethren and his mother looking thereon. So They got to watch their brother being tortured, his tongue being cut out, his body parts being cut off, right? Verse 5, now when he was thus maimed in all his members, so they had taken his arms off, taking his legs off, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought to the fire and being to be fried in the pan. How wicked is that, man? You cut his tongue off, his arms and legs, now you throwing him in the goddamn frying pan. And as the vapor of the pan was for a good space dispersed, they exhorted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus, the Lord Yahweh looketh upon us, and in truth hath comforted us, as Moses in his song, which witnessed to their faces, declared, saying, and he shall be comforted in his servants. So when the first was dead after this number, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off the skin of his head with the hair, they asked him, what wilt thou eat before thou be punished throughout every member of thy body? So now they really did take off his skin and his hair, man. Right? And they're going to ask him, are you going to eat the pork now before we torture you? But he answered in his own language and said, La'ah. Right? It says he said no, but he said La'ah. Wherefore he also received the next torment in order as the former did. So they did the same thing to him that they did to the first one. But he said La'ah. He just told him no and just did his thing. That was his last word. No, I ain't eating pork, niggas. And when he was at the last gasp, he said, thou like a fury takest us out of this present life, but the King of the world shall raise us up, who have died for his laws unto everlasting life. You see? So Yahweh Shem Shai is going to raise us up. You know, so with your fury, you take us out of here, but the Lord is going to save us. Okay? Let me see here. And I think verse 11 was the last point 11 and 14 is really one that I'll read 11 through 14 and I'll wrap it up. It says, and said courageously, these I have from heaven, and for his laws I despise them, and from him I hope to receive them again. Insomuch that the king and they that were with him marveled at the young man's courage. So as manly as they were, they marveled at that. For that he nothing regarded the pains. He was eating that shit. See, that kind of shit get me hype, man. He was eating it. You know, they probably tripping because he probably wasn't screaming. He probably wasn't bothered by it. He just eating it, taking it like a man, bro. You know, hey, as Yahweh Shai, right? The lamb, you know, led forth the sheep to the slaughter. But he ate that shit, man. But the Lord probably made it to where his body went numb, where he didn't really feel it. You know, it says, now when this man was dead also, they tormented and mangled the fourth in like manner. So when he was ready to die, he said thus, it is good being put to death by men, to look for hope from him, the Most High, to be raised up again. As thee, thou shalt have no resurrection to life. You see? So he basically says it's a good thing to die by men, because I'm going to keep keeping the laws of my power. But for y'all going to die, and it's going to be terrible for y'all. Y'all not going to make it out. You're not going to be in a blessed situation. You know, so it's all right if y'all try to put your hands on us and put us to death. And even the mother, you know, it basically ended up dying for the laws of Yahweh Shem Shai. It says she had a manly stomach. She had courage like a man ultimately when they went to her. So hey man, this is just an example of, you can't, just because Jacob trouble come and everybody else accountable don't mean you can do it. If everybody else is eating swine, don't mean you can do it. You can't break. The Lord will provide you with, you got to have faith. The Lord's going to provide you chicken. If you're in an instance where you're just out on the run and you're hungry, the Lord will provide you vegetables. The Lord will provide you sustenance, a deer, fish, right? He's going to give you those things. But in moments like this, if you got to risk your life for the mercy and the grace of Yahweh Shem Shai, this shows his faith and how much you believe him. He says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. So if you got to die for the Lord, then do it. You know? And Yahweh Shem Shai going to save you and give you resurrection of life, brother. You know, and your works do follow. So, hey, I pray, Lord willing, that this lesson was edifying. I want to give all the praise, all the honor, and that are doing this work in sincerity and truth around the four corners of the earth. And much love to the 1/3 of you believers out there. Keep fighting and believing in the name of Yahweh Shem Shai. Until next time, Shalom.